to get good work done, like it takes labor, it takes effort, it takes concise strategy and focus. What do you want to say? Who are you saying it to? How do you want to say it? You know, I think these are
your
all
audio
really...
engineer can't be your
Right.
audience developer. Like it's just
We
doesn't work
hired
like
a
that.
guy. We're starting a podcast. It's like,
Yeah.
Okay. Welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, where we get into the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Jean Belenky, a podcast and media strategist, specializing in marketing and audience development.
And I'm John Kiernan. I'm a podcast producer, and we're asking the question that's on everyone's mind. Where is the money in podcasting?
Each week, we talk to podcast industry professionals, marketers, and creators who are turning podcasts into a thriving business and making the industry what it is today.
With real revenue, real strategies, and real results.
If you're looking to grow or scale your show, and of course monetize, you're in the right place.
So let's get down to PodBiz.
Today we're joined by Sarah Toporoff, Head of Growth for Disco by Headliner. Sarah, welcome to PodBiz.
Thank you, Norma Jean.
Well, let's get straight into it. Sarah, where is the money in podcasting?
In France. Don't tell anyone because I found it. I don't want anyone else to know. Yeah. So Disco by Headliner, a lot of people who have been in podcasting for a while know Headliner as kind of
audiograms.
The first audiogram maker. We've been around for like 7 or 8 years at this point. So that's how most people know us. So Disco by Headliner is a little bit different. We're kind of taking the idea of an audiogram, but instead of like creating a video version and a video format of your podcast, we're actually promoting podcast clips directly from the RSS feed kind of across the web in a way that is contextual and hoping to get more people listening to shows based on what they're interested in and not just based on the fact that, hey, this is a podcast, you're listening to a podcast, listen to another podcast, because it's just a delivery mechanism at the end of the day. And what we're interested in the content, and we're interested in people who want to explore topics. So that's kind of the way that we're coming at it, and that's what Disco does. That didn't really explain it, but we can get more into it.
No, absolutely. And I think, for everybody listening, what you basically said is the money is an audience, right? And so for everybody out there who's looking to grow their audience, there's a lot of audience growth tools out there. You guys have one of them. It's a pretty fun one. And it programmatically serves, previews or miniatures of an episode based on people's data, right? And what they're interested in, what they look at. And you also work with a lot of, I want to say like legacy media companies that have their own podcasts, right? About how to promote their own podcasts within, their own ecosystem, right? Like maybe a news company has their own website. And we'll talk about France and Europe specifically in a second. Mm-hmm. So for everybody listening, Sarah is very cool and based in Paris.
Thank you. I don't know if those two necessarily go together, but I'll take them both.
I think they're both you, so they both count.
Cheers.
Absolutely. But I definitely think it's something where, when you're talking about audience growth and the value of an audience, right? Having tools to increase that audience and to help people find great content, right? Discoverability being one of the largest issues that people talk about, or hurdles that we as an industry want to jump or get through. It's definitely a big one that you guys are attacking head on.
Yeah, and it's kind of always what Headliner has been doing, and now we're kind of doing it in this way. Basically, as a company, as a suite of products, we've always been trying to break podcasting out of closed apps and sort of walled garden platforms to the rest of the internet. Because one number that we like to throw around is there's 5.5 billion people online worldwide. And only about 580 million of those are listening to podcasts regularly. And is that a lack of appetite for the audience? Do audiences are just not interested in spoken word audio? I don't think so. I think it's because we don't have the audience channels as built out as other types of mediums or other media.
Yeah, well, podcasting is such a young industry, right? It's going to take a while for us to get those adoption rates up, and for the rising tide to lift everybody within the industry and all boats. But I definitely think it's something where that discoverability piece is huge, right? And sometimes it's finding audience that likes podcasts that are similar or likes media that's similar and to get them to listen. But sometimes it's just getting people to adopt podcasting as a medium, right?
I think, yeah. And I think that the odds are definitely against us, because if you look at kind of the history of the web and like sort of internet connected products and services, audio was really left behind because the web started as a text-based media. Then, still images were added, and then moving images were added. And audio never really had its place in the sun in the like web ecosystem. And so people have kind of just been always like hacking around it. A lot of radio brands have done really good work in terms of like audio products, but that's their core product, right? But now all media companies have an audio offering. And so our goal is to have that be kind of as core content and core audience strategy as they can. And so, yeah, as you were mentioning, one of the use cases for Disco is publishers. So online publishers, newspaper, legacy media, anyone that sort of has a show, a podcast, and has organic web traffic, so people coming to their platform, we can help them transform that traffic, those people, those users, into podcast listeners. And we do so through recommending their shows, their podcast episodes to people within article pages. So in the same way you see like a recommended content block, keep reading on a given topic, we have built out that brick essentially for their audio. So for example, like we work with Al Jazeera, we work with their English and Arabic sites. And at the end of every article, they recommend other articles, but they also recommend different podcasts where you can go deeper into the topics that they're covering that the audience is already engaging with, right? When we integrated Disco into their article pages, their audience doubled overnight, just mechanically, because you are tapping into folks who already have a relationship with your brand, who are already engaging with your content, and you're offering them something new. And what I really love about working with publishers is that it kind of evens the playing field a little bit more, where I think a lot of folks think that they're completely dependent on and beholden to these third-party platforms, and that, if you can't somehow get featured on the Spotify homepage or on Daily Drive, you're just not going to exist as a podcast. And I think it's really empowering to publishers to be like, you know what? Like, you're not a radio station. You're probably not going to build out your own audio products. If you are, great. But, having worked with publisher product teams for a number of years at this point, it's just never prioritized, right? And so we've built out that solution, and we're able to allow publishers to own not their whole audience, because I think that podcasting is also a really great tool to reach new audiences. So maybe you don't have a relationship with Al Jazeera, but maybe you're looking for, world news on Spotify podcasts, and you come across something that's really relevant, and then you develop that relationship with Al Jazeera. Why not? But for the people that are already reading your content, they would also be interested in listening to it. And so, yeah, I think it's a really cool product for that reason. I haven't gotten to the money. Yeah, I know exactly the money.
Audience. Show me the money.
So the other way that Disco can be used is if you don't have your own organic traffic that you can, where you can push your episodes, you can buy spaces within our Disco publisher network. And so what that does is, thinking about a publisher perspective, it's really hard for publishers, even if they have really big podcast audiences, to make that bottom line, because especially a lot of news topics, advertisers get a little bit nervous around those. And, even topics that are very advertiser friendly, like, I don't know, tech, society, stuff like that. It's really hard to get the ad fill to make publisher podcasts specifically kind of stand on their own 2 feet compared with the other forms of monetization that other formats get, like video or, even display.
Absolutely. And it's been very interesting to see in podcasting how we all went from, a traditional approach of like, oh, this is a new medium. Hope it gets on the Apple Podcasts featured page. Hope it gets a Spotify, direct homepage feature or category, top 5. I think it's also something where, we're starting to see a lot of that media strategy that has been utilized by legacy media work its way into podcasting. We're starting to see a lot of really interesting products and platforms that are like, hey, you can do organic or paid, and you can increase your audience through, means that maybe wouldn't be top of mind, right? I think in terms of top of mind audience growth, right, apart from, getting your SEO and your metadata straight and having like a good launch strategy and good PR around that and doing swaps, paid is something that is the Wild West still, right?
Yeah,
And there's a
for sure.
lot
And
of
that's why
companies out there, and it's interesting. Yeah.
it's a very exciting place to be right now because, yeah, I think you should keep, doing feed swaps and barter agreements and pitching to
course.
platforms, but that's all earned media, right?
Yep.
And so, when you're doing any kind of launch or promotion, you need to think about owned, earned, and paid, right? And so I think folks are doing a lot of owned, hopefully. And I know you've talked about it on your show, doing a lot of earned. But the paid portion, I think, is that there's a lot to still be defined. And I think that it's also about teaching folks that, you need all of these kind of
It's
levers.
okay to pay, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, so just, just to talk about what we're doing is, so yeah, you can have, basically we have a publisher network where it's essentially the same as organic, except it's other people's podcasts, OPP, that publishers are agreeing to feature on their sites, which opens up a new line of revenue for the publisher for their podcasts. So, it's not ad insertion, it's not slots. We're not touching anything within their own podcast feeds. We're using essentially page real estate to serve these episodes, these sponsored episodes, to their audience. It's only ever click to play. We don't force any auto plays. We don't preload anything. So
that's a very interesting thing. Yeah, for everybody out there who's listening, it's controversial right now when you have embedded audio within web pages, because if it is automatic, it can be counted as a download if the audio is long enough. So then, you're looking at an inflated download number and you're able to sell ads on that inflated download number when it may not accurately reflect your actual real number of downloads. So there's a lot, that goes into the download. And we've talked about this on the show, the death of the download and all of that. But that's a really important point.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, we're, and when I do my like product demos, maybe it takes a couple seconds to load and I'm like, look, we're not preloading it. Like we're not cheating. Yeah, because you can put as many episodes as you want on a page that load automatically as soon as the user like arrives on that page. And then that, I've seen pages with like, it'll generate like 200 downloads for every like page view, which is, yeah.
Wild. Yeah.
And the times I've been seeing that, it's been people kind of doing it with their own shows, basically. But yeah, I mean, the thing with paid is that I'm on a demystification crusade right now. I've done a couple like webinars and conference talks right now, being like, okay, who the heck is buying listeners? Is that cheating? What do we make of all this, right?
Yeah, because we're in the Wild West of paid, right? And, as an organic strategy girl, like I love getting things really tight. I love getting clear on a brand message. I love when things are cohesive. And for me, I advise to never utilize paid until you've got all your ducks in a row. You're not launching, you're not having conversations. You want to have everything watertight. And then we could start the conversation on paid.
Sure. Yeah, that's one way to do it. We run campaigns for kind of always on shows. We run campaigns for special brand operations.
Yeah.
Like we're doing one now that is a companion podcast to like a TV show that is running currently. And so that's quite like time boxed, right? But yeah, I think, going back to where the money is, there are a lot of like the branded podcast ecosystem in France specifically is I don't know if everyone would agree if I say booming, but I mean, I feel like it's booming.
There are some beautiful podcasts coming out of France. I mean, big couture designers, really interesting things happening where, I think also because France specifically has a culture of having brands within, a protected class. People really attach themselves to the stories of those brands. And so as a result, a lot of those brands are like, let us tell you our story.
Yeah. And a lot of those brands, but then all the other brands too.
Yeah.
Like it's just become like,
because it's the culture. Exactly.
It's a tipping point. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's in the same way that, I don't know, like 10, 15 years ago, like every brand needed to be like a content creator. And now like podcasting is part of the content mix of a lot of brands. And I would say in terms of the way that podcast has been professionalized and professionalizing in France, essentially all of the production studios were launched with a brand studio like in parallel, right? And also I think it has to do a lot with the fact that original podcasts in France were like under monetized for a long time. And so by doing kind of this work for hire with branded podcasting, it was a way for a lot of the studios that weren't attached to a media, that weren't attached to a radio station, to kind of stay afloat.
Yeah, and
and that was
produce
like their
revenue. Yeah.
it was their, it was the biggest piece of the pie. So when I started, I came on to working with Headliner when we launched this paid growth mechanism, this part of Disco, and we launched it with CNN. It was about 2 years ago, and I had been selling kind of the publisher portion to the publishers that I know over here, just kind of testing the waters and trying to get the word out. And when we did this proof of concept with CNN in the States, I was like, let me see if I can maybe sell this here. And because branded podcasting is so developed over here, those budgets were already allocated. So like all of, I think the studios realized really quickly that if you don't get any listens to a first season, nobody's going to buy a second season. And so there was a lot of paid audience growth solutions already on the French market. Most of the studios, the smart ones, I would say all of them, they're all smart. We like them. If you're listening, hi. But they don't sell production without a media buying budget, because that's just how it works, and because they know that's how that is going to be a sustainable activity. And so with those budgets already allocated, and with the relationships I've built through throughout working here for the past 10 plus years, I was able to start running a lot of campaigns pretty quickly. And then the Headliner folks back in the States were like, what's going on in France?
This works. Wait, where's the money in podcasting? It is in France. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very fun, I think, sometimes when you find a really good market fit for a product in that way. And that really leads me kind of into our next question, right, of how you got into the podcasting industry. Because you're in France, you're not French, but you have a legacy media background. And so tell us a little bit about how you ended up in France, but also how you ended up within the podcasting industry as a whole.
Sure. So I did my third year at university in Paris. I was at a 4-year college in Washington, D.C. And I did my third year here. I really liked it. I was like, Paris or bust. I was ready to be an au pair. I ended up being an English teacher for a bit. I was very bad at it. But
I've also been an English teacher. I understand.
Yeah. It's kind of how we are able to move throughout the world, stumbling through. But yeah, so I did like a media studies degree, and essentially all of my professors had just taken buyouts from their, newspapers who were kind of shuttering. And so it was 2008. No one really knew where news was going, what news was going to look like, who was going to pay for it. And my professors were just like, we don't know. Here's how you write a lead, though. Like, it was just, there wasn't any answers.
That was a wild time. There weren't any answers. There weren't any jobs. I mean, the recession was wild. I think it was the highest unemployment since the Great Depression. Like, it was a really wild time.
Yeah. So that was the job market I was
I graduated in 2008. Yeah, I knew people who could not get a job at Starbucks. Like, there weren't jobs. Yeah.
So anyways, I was just like, I'm going to move to Paris and teach English, I guess. And then I happened upon an NGO who actually looked like they were trying to solve for the things that my professors couldn't imagine, right? And so it was a media innovation, journalism innovation focused NGO, and they were running programs that were, connecting startups with newsrooms. I was running a program that was a hackathon series that was we were prototyping new products that were built by the newsrooms themselves, and promoting like cross-functional teams. Again, this is very like 2010s.
Love it.
And that was really, really exciting. And it was also kind of in parallel with when Serial came out. And, we had a newsletter, we had like a blog with this NGO. And, we were always kind of looking what's new and what's next in the digital space, and how can that kind of apply to journalism, or what kind of experiments people are doing. And as soon as I heard like the first or second episode of Serial, I was like, this is a very new and exciting way to do an investigative piece. And so I said, hey, can I, do a write-up about this? I contacted the production team at Serial. I ended up doing an interview with Dana Chivis, one of the producers, and publishing it right around when like episode 3 or 4 came out, I think.
Wow.
In real time.
Wow.
that was kind of a cool like feather in my cap.
That's kind of a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's still online. Oh no, because the NGO doesn't exist anymore. I made sure I republished it to like a Medium account.
Love it.
Because I was like, I'm not losing this one. But yeah, so that was really exciting. And then Serial blew up as we know, and I was kind of like the audio girly at this organization for the next few years. And, we had an annual conference and I was doing all the programming kind of around audio there. We actually got Dana to Barcelona to speak about that first season of Serial, and started developing relationships with folks at Spreaker, different folks that were like already kind of in the podcasting audio space at the time. And yeah, just going kind of like real deep into the topic. It was like I was reading Hot Pod religiously. I remember like when DAI came out, it was so exciting.
Yeah, the early days. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very, very exciting. And I was publishing a lot of like listicles of like, okay, here are all the news podcasts you need to listen to. Here are the English language, like non-US podcasts you need to listen to, and blah, blah, blah. And so, I really wanted to be working in podcasting and specifically within product, because also I was, I had done sort of 5 years of prototyping products. And I wanted to be like, get my hands like dirty. And that was around 2018, 2019. I was still living in Paris. I am still living in Paris. There were not pod jobs in Paris at the time. And so I, somewhat begrudgingly, but somewhat happily, made a detour in radio. So I was working in radio product, and that was very exciting. It was with a legacy software brand, like it was, 30-year-old C++, everything's stacked on top of each other, like big mess.
Yep.
Very, very exciting. Very exciting. No,
if you've ever been to a podcasting and radio conference, if you meet some of the radio people on the tech side, it's just different, right? It's legacy technology, right? Because it's a legacy media. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was a super intense product role, because I was essentially being I was like a user researcher, so I was like interfacing between the end users, who are the people working in radio, and our like dev teams, and it was mucky. It was it was exciting, and it would required sort of a lot of patience, because like public radio, they're big, slow-moving beasts, and we love them for it. But yeah, I learned a lot. I learned a lot about product development, about, agile methodology, about users, about, how product teams work, and a lot about audio.
In the real world. Yeah, in the real world.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Then everything audio. Exactly. You became a true audio girly.
Yeah, I was, because the prototyping was fun, but it was a little bit of a fantasy world. So yeah, and then, I kind of waited out the French podcasting industry until there was like a role that kind of, a client-facing, partnership development type roles that were being hired. So I moved into podcasting and working on a super similar product that I'm doing right now, with a French company, mostly looking after publishers and using their web traffic to grow their podcast audiences. It's a slightly different product approach, but similar to Disco.
Yeah, nice. Well, what would you say is one key move or metric or even a mindset that's made the biggest impact in your podcasting career, but also the success of the clients you work with and their audience growth?
I would say I think we're a little bit over the hump right now, but I'm like, sometimes I just want to shake people and be like, grow up. Like, what do you think this is? Because the thing is, you couldn't imagine a film launch or a book launch without a marketing plan. And I still feel like sometimes in podcasting, there is a naivete of, if we build it, they will come. And it's like, why would they? Why would they? It's completely okay, no, we're going to sit at the big kids table. We're going to put on our big kid panties, and we're going to play with the grown-ups, okay? Real media has strategy.
And budget. Real media has strategy and budget. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Podcasting is now old enough and serious enough and big enough audience-wise that it deserves that.
Yeah. And so I think I'm seeing these conversations less and less.
We're getting
Now
there.
I'm
We're
more
getting
preaching to
there.
the choir. But I mean, I'm so glad that I'm kind of working I'm sort of at the end of the chain, right? And so the people that I'm working with are the middle people who are interfacing directly with these brands. They're like, why wouldn't everyone listen to our show? And it's like, well, and it's the thing. I feel like one thing that I feel like my job is often reminding people that they're good at their jobs. Because I feel like sometimes like when you talk about podcasting, people's like brain falls out, or talking to journalists, and I'm like, you know how to write a headline, and your headline shouldn't start with number 573. Like, that doesn't work for anybody, right?
No,
And so
I think
I
it's
do.
also, it's very interesting, right? Like,
Mm,
does your podcast have a title that is not a number? I mean, this is why I love organic so much, because there's so much you can do just on
yeah.
the organic growth side, right? Just on getting your ducks in a row, your SEO, your metadata.
And that's what's going to perform the best once you
Oh,
do a paid strategy.
gosh,
So
of
that's
course.
also
The worst thing is when people put budget toward a launch or toward a show and haven't brought somebody in to run strategy. And
mm,
it's like, hey, let's flush money down the toilet. And you're just like,
exactly.
oh, please, God, hire me, or
No,
someone
for
I
sure.
know, or someone they know. Like, can we please
Yeah.
help you?
And I think one
yeah.
shift that I've noticed, like in the past, maybe even like 6 months to maybe a year max, is
Mm.
that a lot of these production studios, the person that I was interfacing with was kind of like the 360, like, producer person, right? Who was like
Yeah.
managing the scripts, managing the actors, the voice talent or whatever.
Yeah.
And then also kind of managing the media campaigns, right?
Yeah.
That has been a big shift. A lot of the studios now have dedicated audience teams.
Yes.
Exactly. And it's very, like, it is a job. Like, you can't expect someone
It's
to
a
have
job.
9 different
It really reminds
careers
me of when
paths.
social
Yeah.
media first started, and people are like, we'll get the
Absolutely.
intern to just run all our social media. And now they're like, oh, wait, no, we need to hire an agency. We need to do paid campaigns. Like, who's managed
100%.
budgets of 5 million plus? Like, now it's taken seriously, right?
Yeah.
It used to be like, oh, we'll let the intern run TikTok. And now it's like, hey, actually, like, we're
Yeah.
getting traction. This is where we're getting audience. And so it's very interesting to see that shift within podcasting, because to get good work done, like, it takes labor, it takes effort, it takes concise strategy and focus. What do you want to say? Who are you saying it to? How do you want to say it?
Yeah.
I think these are
your
all
audio
really...
engineer can't be your
Right.
audience developer. Like, it's just
We
doesn't work
hired a
like that.
guy. We're starting a podcast. It's like,
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I like what you're saying about the start of social media too, because I use that metaphor a lot in terms of distribution strategy.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, available everywhere is like the enemy of audience strategy, right? Do you remember, like, at the start of social media, like, it was the exact same copy and, that you would use for Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. Like, it was just the exact same messaging that would just be copy pasted. And now we're realizing, okay, these platforms behave differently. They have different audiences. They have different needs. And so we're going to adapt and tailor.
Yeah, like, you have to write for the algo, 100%.
And one example that I really like to use is Eurosport France, who I worked with for a long time. They had a really robust podcast strategy that was multi-platform. And so working, they were working really smartly, because they had a live video series that was like post-game analysis with their kind of, whatever, football commentators and whatnot, which they would run as like a Facebook Live and I think like a live video like on their channels or whatever. And then that was distributed as a podcast, just the audio portion, and that did really, really well on their site with my help. And then they had other, much more evergreen, much more sort of snackable type, like curiosity, sort of like, why are tennis balls yellow or whatever, stuff like that. And those were formats that were specifically developed for, third-party platforms, and something that would be easy to get into the Spotify Daily Drive and pitch that way. And so it was a very, very smart, very robust strategy that wasn't really high lift in terms of production. So that's something I really like to point to, because I don't even think people think about it that much in terms of, distribution platforms and, who is this for? What is this going to attract? I think people are starting to think about it more in terms of attracting sponsors. And, if you have like if you have a news feed that has some tech news, maybe break out the tech feed as its own feed because it's easier to monetize, that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think there are good and smart, we're taking steps forward in terms of getting, being, playing. How many metaphors can I use? The big leagues, yes.
Absolutely. I think podcasting is growing up for sure. Sarah, what's something people don't know about what you do?
Well, I already mentioned that I teach people that they already know how to do their jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is a large portion of what I do.
You
like,
can
hey,
do this. No, but I also
you have good
think
instincts. You know how to do these things, and you can just do them in audio.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think it's also something where when you're talking about tech sales, right, especially media sales, a lot of it is like impressions and, this is the value of this, but a lot of it is also like strategy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say, like, I think when you're doing paid growth, not if, because you got to do it and you got to figure out the right way to do it for you. So I think that there's two sort of like spectrums that you have to kind of take into account. And I would say, like, there's the awareness to performance spectrum, where awareness is kind of like impressions. So like how many people saw or heard or like, had a bit of contact with your show, with your brand. And then performance is more stuff that you're thinking about, more like conversions, however you measure that. We do kind of guaranteed listens is mostly the performance that we're talking about. Sometimes it's, you talk a lot about subscriptions on the show, like paid subscriptions or, support donations, something like that. So there's awareness to performance. And so there are different ways that you can buy, kind of on that spectrum. And then there's also, the podverse to the rest of the internet, the rest of the 90% of people online. And I think there's a lot of like great products and ways that you can grow within the podverse, and saying, promoting your show to people who are already listening to similar shows, whether that's paid or barter or a combination. But for me, the way that I see it is slicing up a too small already pie, and where I think you also need to think about buying in ways that make the pie bigger, the podcast audience pie.
Rise the tide for all boats. Yeah, I think it's also one of those things where it's very interesting to see how larger companies within the podcasting space are investing and increasing the size of the podcasting industry as a whole. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the tricky part is that a lot of the ways that you can spend outside of the podverse are more impression-based and less performance-based, right? So you can do, you can buy Google Ads, you can buy, social media, you can buy out of home, like poster campaigns. You could do influencer marketing. And then I think, in terms of like the paid performance space in podcasting, I think there is a lot of things that are popping up and people experimenting with different products, which actually makes it a really exciting space to be in. One thing that I like to tell people is just say, know what you're buying, know exactly how your listens are being delivered to whom, and like check, like keep the receipts. One thing that we do is we integrate with like, the Chartables, the Podtracks of the world. And so we're like, we'll tell you where the delivery is happening, but check our work via like trusted third parties. Because I think, the stuff that we're talking about are like, buying and incentivized listens or bots or stuff like that. It's the kind of thing like, do it. If you like, if you need to hit this number for this sponsor or whatever, do it. But it's going to be detrimental.
Girl, that's a hot take.
In the long run. It's going to be detrimental in the long run because it's creating these inflated audiences that advertisers are going to.
I love it. If you need to move the needle, throw some cash at it, but it's not sustainable.
Yeah, exactly. And it's gonna hurt us all in the long run. It's gonna make the tide go out.
Exactly. That tide's not gonna rise for all of our boats.
So many metaphors in this interview.
We're metaphor heavy at PodBiz. We are. We love a metaphor. It's our vibe. No, but I definitely think it's something where it's really important to understand, that impressions are not listeners. And so you need to get clear on what your goals are and what your objectives are far before you talk about a strategy of how to meet them. I think that that's super important.
You have to start from a place of like, what does success look like?
Yeah.
And then you do the media buying strategy and the overall like audience strategy based on that, for sure. Very often what people will say, they're like, well, I don't want to do any spend unless it's to build, like, to reach audiences that are going to be loyal. And I say, if anyone is saying they can sell you loyalty, they're lying. They're lying. You need to earn loyalty.
Where do I buy it? Where do I buy some loyalty? Sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. No, and then I have this slide that I created where I'm like, loyal audience, bottom of the funnel. It is a unicorn. Like, you can't buy it. Like, you can't throw money
I think
to
that good
make
work
loyalty.
speaks for itself. I think, when we're talking about the strategy of how podcasts are made, especially on the branded side, of how you can really curate, thought leadership and the values of a brand. That for sure, good storytelling creates loyalty. But when we're talking about audience growth through, either earned or paid media, that's, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing we can do is, exactly. We can
position you to be in the best places.
Exactly.
To find those loyal listeners, but, we're not on the production team.
Yeah, the show has to be good.
For everybody watching, John is the audio engineer on PodBiz. It's not me.
No, the show has to be good. Solid media plan is not going to fix a bad show. And I think, it's just about finding the activations that are going to make the most sense to reach this end goal, and like filling your funnel in as many ways and as many places as possible in order to increase the likelihood that you will find those loyal listeners, if that's your goal. It's all about professionalization and and recognizing that, audience strategy it's a job. It's a job that needs doing for all shows. And it can't be an afterthought. I like to tell people that my job is everything that happens after you hit publish.
I like that. I like that a lot. Sarah, if you had to start over today, what would you do differently to grow faster or smarter?
In my career?
Sure. Or for your clients? Both.
I don't know if if the stuff that I would change is in my power. I mean, I think that like a lot of publishers were promised the moon in terms of ad fill, and the moon did not show up. And so a lot of publishers either massively scaled back or left podcasting because their audience and revenue goals were not realistic. In a lot of markets, I've seen this happen, and it's a shame because audio is my favorite way of consuming journalism, and like we need more like good options out there.
Yeah.
I'm a listener first, for sure. And the reason that I want to, solve for discovery and bring more audio to more people is because I think it's really important and really fun. And it's just like it's like my favorite thing to do. People are like, what music do you listen to? And I'm like, I don't listen to music.
That's not a thing. We are podcast people.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of a problem. Sometimes. Not really. I'm happy. But yeah, I'm a fan first, and I'm just like, I feel like so many people could become fans if it was easier, if we lowered the barrier to entry and we're, welcoming more people in more places and more ways of listening.
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk turkey a little bit for a second in terms of actual budgets. So when we're talking about news organizations that have their own podcast verticals and their own websites, what kind of budget are they looking at in terms of that ad delivery, right? To make a real difference, to launch a show, to get something really sustainable in terms of an audience that can discover their product and become enraptured with it, as we all do when we hear a great podcast.
So for news organizations specifically, for Disco, we want to be like a revenue generator. We don't want to charge news organizations anything to use the product. So, if you want to use the product, you just want to test it organically to grow your own shows, that's totally cool. We used to have SaaS fees, but like I've worked with publishers long enough to know that that's the end of the conversation if you ask them to cough up, right? It's not happening. And, I think I get that some organizations don't necessarily want sponsored content
on their site, right?
and
It changes the
yeah,
experience.
yeah. And that's fine too. But, there are also news organizations that only want sponsored content. And so within our whole network, it all kind of evens out. And so, yeah, so that is, so we want to give money to publishers. We want to take money from brands and give it to publishers.
Got it. Okay. So if you're working with brands, what kind of budgets are we talking about here?
It's super varied. I would probably say like the average envelope is maybe like between 5 and 10K.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on the goals. Like, we have budgets that are just kind of a super like limited boost, maybe like 1K. And then we have, I just answered a brief for like 100K. It was like some crypto bros. We'll see if they ever get back to me. But like, no, I mean, we do, we can do a strategy over like a year. Maybe we'd be looking at like 30 to 50. And it really depends on your goals because
yeah, and making sure you have the right fit, which publishers you're going to work through, what your shows
exactly
look like, what their
and
content
also,
is, their values. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, some people really want to like stretch the budget to get the most amount of listens. And so then we'll kind of widen the targeting environment in order to do that. And then some, I did a pitch that was like, they're only interested in like Vancouver. Like, it was a brand that was only operating in Vancouver and they only want to reach people in the Vancouver metro area. And we can do that. Like we can target based on geoloc depending on the targeting that you want and how kind of specific you want to get to like the content matching and also like the geo targeting, will assign a cost per listen and guarantee a number of listens based on your overall budget.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, it's been a pleasure having you here today on PodBiz. What are you most excited about coming up within the podcasting industry?
I'm excited for like, I don't know, just to kind of see the smart like strategies that are going to kind of get us out of this rut, because I feel it was a little bit of a boom, but we're like a constant boom bust, right? But that's all like digital media all the time. Like I think it's a fair assessment to say everyone is freaking out about video. Freaking out. Audio's dead. I'm like, okay,
video
audio's been dead.
is one of the top topics. Yeah, people are definitely talking about video a lot.
And it should be. And I know you get into it a lot and we're not going to like get into the why and how, but like we're at peak hype cycle. Audio has been declared dead on arrival more times than I can count, and it's just like ride the wave. Like one thing that I like to remind people, I'm like, I was working in audio when everyone said that your podcast would never exist if you did not build an Alexa skill for it. Like we've been here. Like experiment, try the new platforms, do new forms of distribution. It can only help. But don't like throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like we've got a good thing going also.
Yeah, the audio industry definitely is its own thing. And every time, a new wave pops in, right? Or now with the current video wave, it's definitely something where people are reassessing, but video isn't the solution for every podcast. And you can't go on a hot girl walk or do the dishes or, consume podcasting as a secondary medium if you're watching it on your phone.
No, for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Sarah, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you for joining us here on PodBiz.
Thank you, Norma Jean.